What's going on? Murder. Do you want some?
I was born in the U.S., but moved to the far eastern Primorsky territory in Russia to follow a dream. This was my first experience after moving to the motherland. It was February of 2012, and I was 19. I'd only been in Russia for the last month or so, and was staying at the Daka, a vacation home of some distant relative of my grandmother, and they had contacted and arranged for me to stay there. The house was pretty traditional. Lots of wood carvings, lots of uncleared forest, and this great second uncle, or whatever he was, welcomed me pretty openly. This was a bit of a surprise, as I am what most in the States would call a goth. The only strange thing about living with Uncle Mike was the daily steam baths which everyone gathered for. Hotter than hell and more humid than Florida in the summertime. They could almost make you pass out. I had been working hard to save up enough money to move out, and I found an amazing apartment flat in downtown Vladivostok, near the Ruski Island Bridge. They had a little floodlights illuminating the support cables in the colors of the Russian flag every night, and it gave the surrounding area a strange aura all night, which I enjoyed a lot. The building was constructed in 1894 out of red brick, and it was smoky and discolored from over a century of soot, ash, car exhaust, and heavy snow. The inside, though, was amazing. Freshly painted lath and plaster, wood trim, and hardwood floors throughout, plus updated electrical, internet, and cable TV. The apartment was heated by hot water radiators, which was going to take some time to learn, but they were free to use. And in the basement of the building was a laundry room and a storage area full of old furniture left by prior tenants, and I was welcome to take anything from that stash that I wanted. This was lucky for me, since I had nothing of my own that didn't fit in 3 suitcases. So, I spent the next couple of days getting my internet and TV hooked up, taking some furniture piece by piece up from the basement, and trying to lay the apartment out in some functional style. The building had an elevator, which looked like some kind of 1920s retrofit, grafted into the skeleton of the antique building. A massive iron cage with ominous accordion doors, and a skinny cab that clanked and buzzed with electricity as it chugged up and down from floor to floor. An older lady who lived about 3 apartments down from me on my floor stopped in to give me a stern lecture on living in such an old building. I expected her to warn me about the plumbing, or that the hot water took a long time to start flowing. Instead, she told me to mount a cross over every doorway, and the main door of my flat, too. She also warned me against taking the old monster, which she used to describe the old elevator, between midnight and 5 a.m. She claimed that it would malfunction, but only during those hours. It would take you to random floors or straight to the basement. On occasion, it would even stop between floors and not start working again until exactly 5 a.m. She also told me to expect to see a lot of black cats around the building. In Russia, unlike the West, black cats are considered good luck, particularly if one walks up to you without being called, so you see them everywhere. They were also there to catch the mice, which she told me were imenotak, Russian version of this big, and she stretched out her hands to the size of a small dog, and then started laughing as if her joke had been worthy of actually being a stand-up gig. That night, I went to work at the radio station around 10 p.m. and returned home after 1:30. Of course, I didn't remember her warning about the elevator and hopped in, taking it up to the 5th floor. The elevator had a lever you had to pull back, and light indicators told you which floor you were on, and you had to push the lever back into place to stop at the proper floor. It took a little practice, but I was able to do it with no real difficulty. It worked exactly the way it was supposed to. I got off on my floor without a second thought, and as I walked down the narrow hallway towards my apartment, I had the sensation that I was being watched. I turned, but of course the hallway was empty. I took several more steps, and once again I felt like someone was there. Actually, it felt like someone was right behind me. I spun around as quickly as possible to try and catch who was ever following me off guard. There was only air. When I turned to resume the walk to my apartment, I was startled to see one of the building's various black cats standing off to one side of the hall. It was staring very intently at something back the way I had just come. Whatever it was, it seemed to be pretty captivating. I walked toward the cat, but it was still fixated on whatever it was watching. Its head low and one paw raised as if it were ready to charge at any moment. I got to admit, it was a little creepy. The sensation I had just experienced, and now this random cat acting as if something was there. I thought maybe it might have been stalking a mouse, and I looked around a bit to see if I could find one. But again, there was nothing there. No mice. I was curious, and standing here in this cold hallway watching a cat, watching air that was going nowhere. So I whispered, "Hello?" But nobody answered. I tried again in Russian. "Privet?" The cat was inching its way towards the spot in the middle of the hallway between where I stood and the elevator doors. A very low growl was starting to escape its little body, and the adrenaline started to flow. I expected something was going to happen. The tension was building so thickly in the air, the hair on the back of my neck started to stand up. Suddenly, and completely out of nowhere, a very loud thud sound shook the entire hallway. Literally, you could feel the vibrations through the wood floors. It felt like someone had driven a car into the side of the building. That might have accounted for it. That's how intense it seemed. But the hallway stayed silent. The poor cat freaked, jumped in a wide arc, and disappeared down the hallway in the opposite direction. I took a few heavy breaths and tried to calm down a bit. My heart was pounding and my ears felt like they were going to explode. I walked to my door, opened it, and immediately saw what made the noise. Everything that had been sitting on the top of my dining room table had somehow fallen off. My suitcases and a heavy wooden trunk I had brought up from the basement to use as a coffee table. They were all on the floor, but not right under the table. More like a few feet away, like someone had pushed them off the edge from the opposite side of the table. Also strange was that as loud as the sound had been, not a single neighbor appeared to have noticed. There were no calls, no sounds of people in the hallway looking for a cause of that massive boom, and no knocks on my door. In the morning, I met a few more of my neighbors on the 5th floor. I asked them if they had heard the noise from the night before, but none of them really seemed interested in talking about it. A polyclinic dentist who lived in the apartment by the stairs recognized that I had an interesting accent when I spoke Russian. I told him I was from the U.S., and he just chuckled a bit and said, "In Russia, we understand these things. Unpack your suitcases. Ghosts hate travelers." What could possibly go wrong, right? So, let's go all the way back to when a friend and I were around 14 years old. This is in the days before the mass adoption of the internet, and so a lot of time was spent outdoors after school playing around with friends. Where I'm from, it would get dark fairly early in the winter, and the house I grew up in had a fairly large plot of land surrounding it, which is where our story takes place. A game that my friend and I really enjoyed around this time was to play hide-and-seek using a torch to help find the person who was hiding, also known as flashlight for anybody in the U.S. My parents had this fairly powerful one that we would sneak out of the house and then use in the game. The person seeking would close their eyes and count to 50 or so, and the person hiding would run off into the night and get to a spot where they wouldn't be easily found. The big rule of the game was that the person seeking had to keep the torch on at all times, and the person hiding was discovered if illuminated by said torch. It made for a fun game of cat and mouse, where you could know where your seeker was and use this to your advantage when repositioning. But of course, they could easily spin around quickly and cast a large circle of light over the trees or whatever and catch sight of your white shirt or sneakers. It kept us entertained anyway, and I guess my parents thought it was nice we were doing stuff outside, although it often ended up being fairly creepy and late. This one time, it was my turn to be the person hiding, and I headed down to what I felt might be a good spot, way off towards the far boundary wall of the house. The property was encircled by land, but beyond the low stone walls surrounding it were other houses with their own bits of land. It was very dark away from any house lights, and in this area there was an old abandoned hut that was falling apart. Long grass, a few trees, and a large trench that was deep enough to stand in and disappear below ground level. The obvious place to hide was either under or inside the hut. The door was locked, but it had no windows, though for whatever reason I felt this was way too easy this time around, and I took the chance to get down into the grass just close enough to the ditch that I could slide into it if needed, but keep my head up to watch for the approach of the lamp. Nothing happened for a long time, but I had a feeling that someone was close by. I glanced off to the side and caught sight of my friend, only he wasn't using the torch. That sneak! He appeared to have his hand over the end of it so that light wasn't coming out, or maybe he'd turned it off and was keeping his hand near to the button in order to snap it on again if needed. Clearly, he'd gotten annoyed that the light was giving him away, and I was avoiding him when he really had just been looking in the wrong place. The land available to us wasn't that vast. Basically, if you were smart, you could use the threat of the moving spot lamp to force the person to move and just listen for the sounds of that, gradually pinpointing where they must be. But no, my friend wasn't doing this. He was trying to do things the easy way and get one up on me. Probably give me a jump to boot. Well, I wasn't going to let him do that. I slid into the ditch. Now I was going to be very hard to find without shining that light down into where I was, particularly with the hut acting as a great distraction. I decided not even to try to get away since I couldn't watch for the light to see which way he was looking. So I just stayed there, very still. Annoyingly, despite my clever hiding spot, my friend got closer and closer and closer to the trench, brushing through the grass in a very deliberate manner and seeming to have a good idea of where I was. I waited for the game to be up, trying not to move. I still didn't see any light. And then, after what felt like forever, my friend walked right by and kept going. I still didn't move. I really, really wanted him to never find me because he was cheating, and it was only when I saw the light way off back towards the house that I climbed out of the ditch and started to loop back the other way. I eventually got caught, and in the debrief after the round, I told my friend just how close he had gotten to finding me in the ditch. He looked slightly concerned. "I didn't go up that way," he said. I laughed as though he was messing with me. "Yeah, you did," I replied. "You were covering the torch trying to catch me out." I don't think we ever ran back inside a house as fast as we did in that moment. I have no idea who it was down at that part of the property in the dark that night, or what they were holding in their hands, and why they seemed to be searching for someone. Me? Despite very much not being invited to play our game. So, creepy guy trying to get in on our wholesome game of hide-and-seek in the dark? Let's not meet.